Hello everyone, and my apologies for this way overdue video, but between work and designing other things and just a whole host of other things, I wasn't able to get around to it until just now. So, over the past few weeks, months really, I made several bold claims about the design for my mod, which is for Alaska. I'm aware that for many people that these will seem irrational, so I've decided to explain my reasoning a little bit. Let's start with the basics. So this is the real version of Alaska that exists in the real world. You can see with the airport and the city itself, and you can even match it up with the map that you get in the actual DLC, which is right here. Two very important things will be noticed right off the bat. This cove right here, where the US had its amphibious assault in the actual mod that you see the Chinese shelling in the very beginning, doesn't actually exist in the real world. It doesn't exist right here in the real world. It actually does exist, but um, it exists elsewhere in Alaska, and that was the case opening, case breaking thing where I finally figured out what was actually going on here. Because you see, the events that you face in the actual mod, they occur, but they do not occur in actual Anchorage itself. They occur around the state. So you're probably wondering how I know this, and well, here's a screenshot. For starters, this mountain range doesn't actually exist. When you're here at the artillery overlook, you're essentially approaching this design pointing this way. So that mountain range would be right here, which puts it where Ted Stevens Airport is. So I know that's just straight up wrong. But let's backtrack a little bit and talk about this cove. What broke the case on this was the cove's close relation to the mining outpost and the train yard and the tunnels, because it actually does exist. It exists down here in Whittier. In fact, you can actually see the train tunnel itself going through the mountain range and leading to the major port facility that is right here, which of course is where a train yard is located. Now you're probably thinking, oh, well, that can be anywhere in Alaska. I'm like, no, actually, this is the only one that exists. I legitimately checked, and this is the only major underground train tunnel which is connected to a major port facility with a rail yard in all of Alaska. So if you're wanting to claim artistic license, it's just straight up wrong. Um, so this also supports a theory that I've had for a long time. The main reason this war went on for 10 years was because the Chinese and the US could both resupply by sea. And you're probably wondering how that worked, and it's just a case of China could resupply directly to Anchorage. And then you have the oil pipeline. The oil pipeline that you saw in the actual DLC is the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. It actually does not go to Anchorage, it goes to Valdez. So the U.S. Army base that you see both in the mod and in real life was in Valdez. So while the Chinese could resupply directly to Anchorage, the U.S. could resupply directly to Valdez, which meant that the oil pipeline itself went this way, meaning that Lake Louise, which was the frozen lake you saw in the actual DLC, was right here. Now then, you're probably wondering what other evidence I have to support this claim because, well, it demands more attention. The mining facility itself, this one right here, it actually does exist. It really does. In fact, I can show you which one it is. These are all the mines localized in the area where it could possibly be located. I've checked them all, every single one of them. The only one which has the art aesthetic that you saw in the actual DLC is this one right here. And you can see it for yourself. Kennequot Mines National Historic Landmark. It even looks like the one that existed in the actual DLC. You will note that it is not over here in Anchorage. It is instead over here, which is past Valdez. And considering the location of Lake Louise, this just adds to the whole theory that the events that occurred in the actual DLC happened in all of Alaska over the whole 10-year span of the war. More specifically, the last year when things finally broke down for the Chinese. But essentially, it didn't happen right here. It happened way over here. This also makes sense from a military standpoint because the two armies would essentially be fighting over Lake Louise in this whole section right here. The U.S. coming up this way, the Chinese coming up this way. And surprisingly, using this theory, the Chinese actually had two army groups in Alaska at the time. One up near Fairbanks, the other one down here in actually Anchorage. And this is essentially supported by the fact that the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline comes up from Valdez, and they're up here to the I can't remember what it's called, but there's an oil refinery, Petrostar refinery up here in Fairbanks. So then you have the major question of where precisely was the Chimera Depot, because you would essentially need a facility capable of maintaining and repairing armored vehicles, tanks. They were drilling rigs, but they were tanks, let's be honest. Now, even though the actual DLC said that those tanks were bullshit, I have to roll with the assumption that at least one existed and they would need to be able to do that somewhere. So I've had to figure out, okay, well, what sort of facility would you need for this? And then it hit me. One does actually exist. It's right here at Fort Greely. And I actually did build this for the mod, and we'll show it off in the next video. So Fort Greely, which would be right here near Delta Junction, was and still is capable of doing that. So I thought, okay, so the Chimera Depot is here, oil refinery here, the mining camp was here, U.S. base here, lake here. So I eventually did figure out where all of these locations were. It's just that none of them were actually located in Anchorage. And so there was a lot of artistic license here, but for the sake of argument, when I have to design the entire area and make it reasonable, I'm not going to make up a bunch of shit that I know for a fact is wrong. So I couldn't explain any of these details being here, but I could explain where they really exist in the actual real world. So that means one thing and one thing only. I had to build it all. So this originally I was just going to build the Alaskan Range right here because it was a nice bowl and it was all self-contained. But then I figured out where the oil refinery has to go, and then I expanded the entire thing up north to include Fairbanks, and that has also been a major delay in the project. Oh, I should also explain that there are actually 3 Petrostar refineries in Alaska that were all prime candidates to be the one that existed in the DLC. There was one in actual Anchorage. To their credit, I will be honest about this. It's right here, actually. It's not in the middle of the city, but it's right here. It's just that the oil pipeline doesn't go to it like it does in the real world. Eventually, after all this research, I figured out that I had to essentially attach the oil pipeline to it, which meant that the real one was up here in Fairbanks, and the other one is like down here somewhere. I can't remember precisely. I know it's in this area right here, though. So there are 3 of them. I know which one is the correct one. So there is that I had to explain as well. So yeah, I actually did sit down and figure out where all these locations were. And it took me a while to figure out how the actual war went. Because what happened here was that the U.S. eventually tried to open up a second front. And that's when they invaded Whittier. And they tried to move up from the south as well as the north. And that's how they ended up retaking the city. But, that detail and all of that didn't get into the simulation because all of these events had to be condensed down into this, I guess, or as a DLC, they didn't want to build all of this, which I really can't fault them for, considering what I've been doing for the past few months. So, yeah, you're free to check all this up for yourself. I know I'm on the level about it. I know that a major railroad tunnel, such as the one you see right here, leading into a major port facility and a railroad facility, only exists right here in all of Alaska. It just it exists nowhere else. I know which mining complex it was, and you're free to compare it to the real one. I know where they would be able to actually maintain the tanks. And I'm sorry, but the oil pipeline goes to Valdez, so kind of got no excuse on that one. Oh, and just for quick reference again, a giant mountain doesn't exist right here. That mountain doesn't exist right there. I understand why they built it though. That was there as eye candy because you had like a bunch of empty space right here, and you had to put something there so that when people look out over the city, they get this really scenic vista. But for someone like me who actually has to build this now, it just doesn't exist. And yeah, that is it. That's all I wanted to share with you guys so that you could see where my reasoning was coming from and why all of this got built the way it was and why everything isn't just centralized right here like it is in the actual DLC instead of real life. All right, that's all, guys. I'll see you guys next time.